All right, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. We all made it through 2020. I'm Mayor Tom here to call this Common Council meeting to order for Tuesday, January 5th, 2021. Pat, when you're ready, could you please take a roll call?
Adams,
Present.
Gray,
Present.
McCabe,
Here.
Pfeifferone,
Present.
Reed,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
Tom,
Here.
all present.
Is everyone able to hear me all right on Zoom this evening? All right, got some thumbs up, thank you. All right, if able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this meeting has been noticed in accordance with state statutes and local ordinances. Next item is to approve the agenda for the evening. Unless there's any alterations or deletions, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Adams, second.
Motion from Ryan, second from Adams to approve the agenda. Any discussion on the motion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Agenda is approved. Move on to correspondence and communications. I don't believe we have anyone signed up this evening for the regular meeting. We do for the committee of the whole meeting. Move on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda this evening, we have the council and the committee of the whole meeting minutes from December 15th, 2020, as well as applications for operators licenses for the term of July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2022. Had 3 names in the packet: Derek Grubbs, Michelle LaChance, and Christine Seidow. Any questions on the items in the consent agenda? If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Adams moves to approve the consent agenda.
Gray seconds.
All right, motion from Adams, second from Gray to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on the motion? If none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. On to new business item number 1, consider and take action on resolution 1-21, the Dodge County Hazard Mitigation Plan. We did discuss this at the last committee of the whole meeting 3 weeks ago. Shake off the cobwebs here a little bit. We did approve a similar document at the end of 2020 for Columbia County, and this is much the same, that allows us funding for any mitigation projects in the land that we have in Dodge County, which would be the wastewater treatment plant and the recycling center. Any questions on resolution 1-21?
I don't have a question, but I do notice a typo at in the last paragraph. If I'm gonna be picky. Dodge is spelled D-O-G-E.
Yeah.
Just, got a D there.
Good catch. There's one typo above, paragraph above that. Be it is one word. Maybe it's supposed to be, but I thought it was 2 words. All right, any other questions or comments on resolution 121? If there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 1-21, the Dodge County Hazard Mitigation Plan.
Alder Gray will move to approve resolution 1-21, the Dodge County Hazard Mitigation Plan.
McCabe, seconds.
Motion from Gray, second from McCabe to approve resolution 1-21. Is there any discussion on the motion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Move on to item number 2, under new business. Consider and take action on the Wisconsin Service Award Program revised adoption agreement. Again, this was reviewed at the last committee of the whole meeting. This has been a long-standing agreement that we have with our local volunteer firemen, and there's just been some proposed changes. I believe Attorney Johnson did review this and didn't have any concerns, and there were no questions from the council at the last meeting. Are there any questions this evening? If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the Wisconsin Service Award Program revised adoption agreement.
Adams moves to approve the Wisconsin Service Award Program revised adoption agreement.
Alder Piper seconds that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the Wisconsin Service Award Program revised adoption agreement. Is there any discussion on the motion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Move on to item number 3, consider and take action on the Hibbert Street change order number 3. This was reviewed at the last committee of the whole. We had Jason Leith, our city engineer, to go through all the various aspects of the change order. Gotta get down to that part. The total increase for the change order is $57,317.38, of which the city's portion would be $42,714. That would come from the contingency from the borrowing for the project. This would use less than half of the contingency that we had borrowed to cover any of these change orders. The other two portions would be paid for by the water and light utility and the wastewater utility. We have Jason with us this evening if anyone had any questions on the change order. I see no questions. If there are no questions for Jason, take a motion to approve change order number 3 for the Hibbert Street project.
Adams moves to approve change order number 3.
Alder Piper will second that.
Motion from Adams, second from Pfeiffer on to approve change order number 3 for the Hibbert Street project in the amount of $57,317.38. Is there any discussion on the motion? If there's no discussion, could you please take a roll call, Pat?
Gray,
Aye.
McCabe,
Aye.
Pfeifferone,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Adams.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Move on to the city claims, if I can get there. All right, number 4, consider and take action on the city claims in the amount of $191,234.71. Are there any questions on the city claims as submitted? If there are no questions on the city claims, I'll entertain a motion to approve in the amount read.
Alder Piper will make the motion to approve the claims in the amount.
Alder Ryan second.
Adams seconds.
We have a motion from Pfeiffer on and a second from Ryan to approve the city claims in the amount of $191,234.71. Is there any discussion on the motion? If there's no discussion, could we please take a roll call, Pat?
McCabe,
Aye.
Pfeifferone,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Adams,
Aye.
Gray.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. City claims have been approved. We'll move on to report of city officers. I'll turn it over to Administrator Ellison.
All right, thank you. Just a couple quick updates as we get into the first meeting of 2021. Tax collections are obviously underway for property taxes. Surprisingly, we're almost exactly on the dot. We're about 50% collected. About $5.9 million we've collected so far. Obviously, most of that is going to go out to other taxing jurisdictions once we do the closeouts. There is a drop box at the front door with instructions and envelopes, and there's some online options as well if you don't want to come to City Hall and make your payment at the drop box. And above all, I guess if you have any questions about the bill, how to pay the bill, or anything related to your property tax, a bill that you received or didn't receive, call us at City Hall, and we'll try to work with you to identify whatever information that you might need. Also, being the winter season, it's hard to tell with the fog, but there's snow out there, and so just always a reminder to keep your eye on the sidewalks by your residents, and also the winter parking rules, as we're going to have storms kind of coming through occasionally. Just makes it safer for everyone if we pay attention to those and keep the sidewalks and parking safe and following the regulations. And then also, I think just in general, I'm pretty excited about announcing that we had that recruitment open for quite a while for our Director of Public Works. And it took a while to kind of get the right amount of people interested and get the process going. And we did several rounds of interviews, and we did offer that position to David Dernberger, and he was excited and accepted, and I'm pretty excited about having him start. He will be moving back to Wisconsin from out of state, and that we should see him start by January 25th, depending on how the move and everything goes. He might be here a few days earlier, but overall, I think it's going to be a really a great addition to the city of Columbus, and he's going to bring a lot of extra skills that will be valuable to me and to the city in general. And then just to kind of close out what else we have going on, we're just kind of in that phase of ramping up for the new year, closing out from 2020 and preparing to onboard the Public Works Director. So just a lot of different things going in different directions right now. But as always, for the council, if you have any questions on anything, just feel free to give me a call or stop in.
Had a few things. Today, the National Guard provided a drive-through COVID-19 nasal swab testing in Columbus at the Columbus Water and Light, a facility located at 950 Maple Avenue. This testing will again occur on February 2nd and March 2nd, 2021, between the hours of noon and 6 p.m. The free testing is open to the community and appointments are not necessary. In an effort to save time, they do encourage online registration. If you do not register online, you will still be tested, and staff on site will assist in the registration process. Registration should not be done sooner than 24 hours prior to the event at the link provided through the Columbia County Health and Human Services website, and also we have a link at the City of Columbus website. Due to the unknown amount of interest, people are prepare for potential wait times. Long wait times, it's requested that vehicles form a line and stay in the mode of transportation at all times. No restroom facilities will be available on site, so please plan accordingly. Individuals will be contacted with their results within 3 to 7 business days, so please visit our website for further guidance and up-to-date information for these upcoming events. Let's see. 2020 ended with our first significant snowfall here in Columbus. Snow emergency was declared, having met the 2-inch snowfall threshold. Thanks to our dedicated city snowplow drivers and DPW staff, the streets were cleared and the snow emergency was lifted by 7 a.m. the following morning. As we know, Wisconsin winters can provide a wild and unpredictable array of weather events, so thanks to the preparation and planning by city staff, this first snow event went very well. Thanks to all the snowplow drivers for getting the city streets cleared effectively and efficiently. Also, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Urban Forestry Program has selected the 2021 grant year recipients, funding 48 applications and a dollar-for-dollar match. Former DPW Director Zach Navin submitted an application for the City of Columbus before his departure late last year for a $25,000 grant, And we have been informed this week that we are one of the 48 recipients of this grant. This is really good news to start off the new year. This funding will allow us to double our efforts this year in managing our urban forest by continuing with the removal of the emerald ash trees. That's all I had.
I'm gonna chime in here.
Yep.
That's excellent
Katie?
news. Happy to hear that. I just wanted to take a moment to let the public as well as my fellow council members know that I have decided that I will not be seeking reelection in April. I put a great deal of thought into my decision, and I concluded that at this time I cannot commit to an additional 2 years of service. I have learned so much in the past year and a half from the residents, the fellow council members, the mayor, and the city staff here in Columbus. I will continue to serve in my role as council president and as District 1 Alder until my term is concluded in April. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Katie. It's been a pleasure working with you, and we're not done working yet. We've got 4 months left, so.
We'll save the big speech for April.
All right. Thank you. All right. Item number 6 is to convene to close session per state statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub G to confer with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. We would need a motion and a second to go into closed session for the reasons stated.
Alder Gray will move to go into closed session for reasons stated.
Adams seconds.
Motion from Gray, second from Adams to move into closed sessions for the reasons read. We need to take a roll call.
Piperone,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Adams,
Aye.
Gray,
Aye.
McCabe.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, we will be going into closed session. We'll be reconvening back into open session to take any potential action and also for adjournment. So, see you on the other side. Are we broadcasting right now?
No, we're not, well, your mic is on, so yeah.
Broadcasting on cable?
On cable, yeah.
Okay. So I should probably let anybody know that's watching, we're having technical difficulties and trying to get everybody back into our Zoom meeting. Apologize for the inconvenience, but Windows is getting ready.
All right, Paul Pyfrom, can you hear us? Okay.
Sorry about that, we had to swap out a computer here because Windows decided to update, so sorry for the inconvenience. We are reconvened back to open session, and we are on new business item number 8, which is consider and take action on possible termination of service agreement with ActiveNet. I believe it is the consensus of the council to provide notice to terminate our contract with ActiveNet. Would anyone care to make a motion?
Send a letter of notice to ActiveNet to terminate its contract at the end of the current term, January 16th, 2022. Do you need more than that?
Should work.
Adams seconds.
Motion from McCabe, second from Adams. to send notice that the City of Columbus elects to terminate its contract with Active Network LLC at the end of the current term, January 16th, 2022. Any discussion on the motion? If there's no further discussion, could we please take a roll call, Pat?
Reed,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Adams,
Aye.
Gray,
Aye.
McCabe,
Aye.
Piperone.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Next item is to adjourn.
Alder Gray moves to adjourn.
3 seconds.
Motion from Gray, second from Reed to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll stand adjourned for just a second and reconvene to the Committee of the Whole meeting. Thank you.
Is it just my
2021. I have the time now as 7:20 PM. Pat, would you please take the roll?
Adams,
Present.
Gray,
Present.
McCabe,
Here.
Pifferone, Paul? He nodded. Reed,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
Tom,
Here.
all present.
Okay, this meeting has been recognized with state statutes and local ordinances. Number 3, if there are no alterations, I will take a motion to approve the agenda.
Alder Gray will move to approve the agenda.
Adams, seconds.
Alder Piper will second that.
Okay, I have a motion and 2 seconds to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, agenda's approved. Number 4 is citizen comments. I had one gentleman signed up for citizen comment, but has chosen now to speak on the item. So, to my knowledge, I don't think I have any other citizens signed up for comment this evening. Is there anybody else on Zoom that wanted to speak under citizen comment? Oh, okay, so I have 2 signed up under number 11, okay. Thank you. Okay, moving on then. Number 5 is the committee and commission minutes. We had quite a few committee and commission minutes within our packet this evening. The Aquatic Center minutes from 6:10, 8:26, both of 2020. Cable Commission from 9:2, 10:07, both of 2020. The CDA from 10:19 and 11:23. The CHLPC minutes from 11:12. The Columbus Water and Light from 11:19. The library minutes from 6:16, 8:18, 9:15, and 10:20. The Plan Commission minutes from 8:13, 9:10, 10:15, 11:12, and the PFC minutes from 8:17. Recreation minutes from 9:14, and tourism minutes from 8:03 and 9:14. I just wonder if city staff was just waiting for a kind of a shorter cow packet to just put all of those minutes into one for some extra reading. Did anybody have any comments on any of the committee commission minutes that were within our packet this evening? Not seeing any. So we'll move on then to number 6, which is review and discuss music and memory donation to the senior center. We have the senior center director, Kim Lang, with us via Zoom this evening. And there's a memo in our packet about donation from EnterPAC for the music and memory program. Kim, did you want to speak to this item?
Sure, just real quickly.
Sure.
Good day, everyone.
Good
Happy
day.
New Year. This particular program is a program that we've been working on for a couple of years as one of our community outreach programs, going into the homes of our friends and neighbors who aren't able, for whatever reason, to participate at the senior center. This particular program focuses on folks of all ages with cognitive issues. And it's really just an incredible program. Once we get this program underway, we'll have community programs that don't just go to some of our assisted livings, but they'll also go into individuals' homes. It's just a great program. If anybody has questions about it or really wants to know about it, with the grant proposal that I wrote to EnterPAC, the information is in there where you can find out more about the program. We had hoped to do this last year, but unfortunately, COVID um, sort of took away the opportunity for us to meet with all the key players in this program. So now we're going forward, and EnterPAC has been really generous um, and has said that they will help take care of this program for us this year. It'll pay for training and our startup equipment. And we have other donations that'll cover not just this year, but into next year. Really, the only cost to this city would be my time. So it's a great opportunity for us to do some things for people outside of the senior center building. And we're just really excited about it. So we hope that you like the idea and you approve this donation.
Thank you, Kim. Yes, that was excellent just to kind of read about that, and thank you for putting the memo together. That's very exciting, and I look forward to those times outside of COVID where these types of programs can thrive. But I wonder what, does council have any immediate questions for Kim or initial thoughts? Trina?
Reed is very excited that this wonderful signing program that we heard about last year is going to come to fruition. And that now there's an additional grant that's going to fully cover it for over a year. It's wonderful.
Absolutely, I sure.
I concur with that, that looks like a totally worthwhile endeavor.
Okay. Does anybody have any specific questions for Kim, or do we have a pretty general consensus to move this forward? I would assume so. All right, wonderful. So, all right, Kim, thank you very much, and we'll move this forward
Thank
to
you.
the next regular meeting for approval. Okay. Next up on the agenda is number 7, is review and discuss the Butterfly Garden Volunteer Park MOU. And for that, we have Matt this evening, Matt Schreiber, Community Development.
Good evening. So you can see in the memo that I put together that really the need for this item on the agenda was that the layout for the park had changed from what council previously reviewed. So it kind of started a process of, well, maybe we need to reconsider the MOU and at least make council aware of the changes that were made to the park. So, you know, you can see in the packet on the second page of the packet that was submitted, it's kind of this figure 8 shape, which is drastically different from what was approved when we signed the MOU back in April, of more of a square shape. I will say that, you know, the changes may be improvement to the site, but it is a little bit concerning when the changes weren't communicated with city staff, and it didn't appear that they were communicated with the Oddfellows organization before they made these changes. So based on that, in the packet, or in the memo, I put that you know, moving forward, you know, just to kind of reiterate that this is city property and we need to be notified of changes, that there a few items, and then I'll open it up for discussion. One is, you know, having some sort of 2-week written notice if they need DPW equipment or staff assistance. You know, I always feel like DPW's time and equipment is a valuable commodity, and I just want to make sure that they're respectful of that and give us proper notice. Any tree removal will need to meet the shoreline buffer vegetation removal replacement permit from Dodge County. This will make sure shoreline zoning is met, because you're along a river. You can't just go and like remove a bunch of trees. You have to do it in a manner that meets DNR requirements. And then any changes moving forward need approval from council before they happen. So really, I wanted to make council aware of the changes and just have a discussion on how this partnership will develop moving forward. So I guess with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Alder Gray.
Just one question. It seems like all parties involved weren't aware of the changes, so where did the changes come from? Who made the changes if neither the council nor the city staff nor the Odd Fellows knew of them?
It to my understanding, it was the project team that planted the butterfly garden. So I don't know who, I don't know all the parties that were involved on the project team. I know a few of them, but basically it was the team that was down there that was doing the seeding.
So I think what you're trying to say is that maybe it might have included some of the Odd Fellows, maybe, and some other organizations, but it wasn't formally discussed and approved at one of their meetings, is what you're
That is
kind of
my
alluding to.
understanding, yes.
Okay. Trina Reed,
Paul is next, that's all right.
Oh.
You can go first.
Alder Piperon.
I guess I would like to comment that I'm disappointed that somebody without, communicating anything to us, the city, or even amongst the Oddfellows themselves, did a sort of random change that was not approved. And I just looked at number 2 on this list, any tree removal allowed. How are we ensured that one person's not to just go randomly take out a tree and then beg for forgiveness afterwards? I think we need to sit down with them and make sure that there's a true list of hierarchy and and a true list of rules that are supposed to be followed with this, and it can't just be done.
Thank you, Paul. Alder Reed.
I'll agree that the tree removal issue needs to be stressed, that it's, more of a legal requirement for them to get permission. I do have to say, I love the new design. It looks like a professional garden. I'm a little concerned about the feasibility. I'm wondering if the plan is for a gravel trail right away, and wondering who is going to do the brickwork for the center. It looks awesome. I'm just wondering how it will be made real.
Mayor Tome.
I'll need to speak on this a little bit. The figure 8 map that's in your packet was handed to me several days after the seeding was done down there, and I think, as Matt had said, my understanding is that there's kind of a work group or a subcommittee of the Oddfellows group that was kind of taking care of this project. I guess the reason we have to have this conversation as a council is that if these plans change, we had an MOU with specific language in it that said an agreed upon area, and then if the project changes, while it's being installed, what does the city council want to see as far as formality when we're working with a civic organization like the Odd Fellows on a project like this? Because ultimately it is a city park, it's city property, and this is a donation that the city is receiving, and that there needs to be, from my opinion anyway, some formal understanding. In a few of the meetings that we had on site prior to this planning, I did reiterate the fact that we needed to have an updated MOU or some formality brought before the council so they understood the projects that they'd like to be involved in. When you look at the mock-ups, even the old mock-up that we had for the site plan, there's a lot of things that are included in there that we really maybe don't have an MOU to reflect. The trails, as Trina said, it's a good point. Who's going to be responsible for installing the trails? And if this turns into a situation where, they're going to be relying on the DPW staff to do this, we need to know that up front, and there needs to be some formality to all of this.
I agree. Trina, thank you for bringing up that point, because I remember initially we were not planning on adding a gravel path immediately, or So that's a very valid point. So when this garden begins to grow and if it grows into this trail space and beyond, now we may have some issues. And then also for bringing up the bricks there and who's going to be funding and installing those as well. I will say, again, like Trina also said that I do love the design. And instead of calling it a figure eight, I'm going to call it a butterfly. Because that's what I think it is kind of supposed to be alluding to. But yeah, I mean, those are all excellent questions, and I just hope in the future that the city can work with these organizations in a more structured way. I see Alder Adams. Did you want to speak?
Before we move on from this, would we, just building off of what everyone else said, would we be out of line for asking the Odd Fellows what their plans were for who's gonna do the bricks, who's gonna do the gravel, you know, at what time were they thinking of doing it, and just trying to get down to the nuts and bolts of this, just so we have a basic idea moving forward, rather than having a hodgepodge of, okay, Odd Fellows are gonna do this, and then, oh, just so we have a basic plan of what they're thinking, so that we understand what's going on.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent idea. Mayor Tom, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Pete, I think to your comment there, you know, this new design was handed to us after it was implemented, and I think what we need to reiterate is that there needs to be, I guess, somewhat of a master plan that the city has to develop that site. I mean, we have this field right now that we're working on, but I think we've talked about the potential to do this in phases to connect a trail possibly from here up to the recycling center. I know that some of the Odd Fellows have been down there looking at that already. I think the problem we're facing here is there's a lot of really good ideas and a lot of, you know, visions for this area. I have hundreds of ideas, but we need to have some consensus between the civic organization that wants to volunteer and help develop that site and the city, and we need to find the correct mechanism to have a master plan to consider amenities that can go into that master plan, because the city's going to have to accept those amenities piece by piece.
Gotcha.
Alder Gray.
Yeah, I think really the big thing is all of us think it's a great idea, but we did it the other way for a reason. And a lot of that was for cost and to just make sure that we could evolve it as time goes on and that it was safe from erosion over the year. Like, what all did they accomplish to make it into this instead of what we discussed before? And where's the money coming from to do all of this? I think those are the biggest questions. Like, who's paying for it?
Alder Reed.
We could hardly pay for seeding grass, let alone all of this. Like, we were arguing about what kind of seeds to put down, not how much gravel and bricks and like, this is way beyond what we talked about budget-wise. Who's paying for it?
Yeah, for myself, it's more that I want to ask questions of the group. I don't want to throw cold water if the park is building itself. It is possible that the gravel will be donated and the bricks will be donated. I think more of our cost will come up with unexpected maintenance.
Mayor Tom.
Trina, I agree with you. As you point out, I think when we were talking about the original seating, there was discussion about the mulch that would go down to kind of get everything growing, and there was a discussion of grass mat, which turned into thousands of dollars. Now there's a pile of straw mulch down there, and again, that kind of leads to the confusion of, you know, the recommendation we got from city staff was we didn't want to have loose mulch down on a field that was going to blow off or possibly get blown into the river. So those are decisions that were kind of made outside of the MOU that we have with the Odd Fellows that, you know, that kind of framed up that first step. I think the other consideration that the council's going to need to work with these groups in the future as well is we may be getting a donation, and it may be, you know, I like the design of this, I do, but I don't know how much the cost is, who's shouldering the expense of each cost. So to me, it doesn't exist until we have all that information and we have an agreement with someone that can actually implement this, because we're gonna be mowing a field, we're gonna have DPW workers mowing a field this year that we didn't mow before. So there is an added expense, you know, already just at the first phase of this. So we have to be cognizant of how we develop the park and ongoing expenses as well. I do think that we're gonna need to probably develop another MOU with them. Right now, there's seed in the ground, but spring is going to be here soon. And we're gonna have to know what direction we're going in and what the expectations are of how to develop the trail, if the trail is going to go in, and the other items that they're talking about as well. So, unless Attorney Johnson has an idea of a different way of formalizing this other than an MOU, that's the vehicle we've used to this point.
Well, I think the use of an MOU is fine. Unfortunately, I think that we're going to need to put more teeth into the agreement than we had originally hoped. What is in place right now is very general and you know, in all respects a pretty good start. But with what's happened with this new design and everything, I agree with Matt with where he's going, is that the city should put some additional language into the existing agreement and basically express, I'm not sure to whom, but to the Oddfellows at least, that we need a little bit more accountability and less flying by the seat of your pants as this goes forward. And maintaining the 1 acre garden belong to the Oddfellows, so there's no city expense yet, but we should probably flesh out what exactly that means as well.
Thank you, Paul. So I guess I would imagine most council probably agrees that we've got to tighten up that language in that MOU, and hopefully moving forward, we don't have any more run-ins like this. But I also think that we are just going to have to get some questions answered too. Perhaps as Trina alluded to, perhaps they have a plan to pay for these additional items. Certainly would be grateful if they did. I think most of us really just want the rest of this process to go much more smoothly. So hopefully we can just tighten up that language. Mayor Tome.
One more comment I wanted to make, just not specifically about this project, but I think it's a good example to at least begin the conversation. I think it's great to work with civic organizations and different partners and community groups. They volunteer a lot. They make donations to the community. But the one thing that I've talked to Matt and Administrator about recently is having a bit more of a formality on the other end, whereas someone can come into the city council and say, I'd like to donate $1,000. It can be an individual, and for an individual, it's maybe a little bit easier to say, here's a check for $1,000 and here's what I want to donate it for. But when you're involving a civic organization that, you know, should have some structure, they have meetings, we should be asking for those minutes to be sure that that civic organization understands what they're involved in. If there's a signature and there's an MOU, it shouldn't just be one person from the organization, in my opinion. And I think that would definitely help with the communication between the city and partners on projects like this.
I would agree. As far as direction on this item here, do we want to bring this back then again to the next COW meeting? And then hopefully at that time get some answers from the Oddfellows on the changes, as well as then discuss what language we would like to add at that time to the MOU? Ian, sorry, I didn't see you there. Go ahead.
I think if it comes back to a cow prior to that, city staff should get with the Odd Fellows and the civic organization and develop at least some sort of an MOU for us to go over at the
Yeah.
next meeting. Like, if we have some basis of a new MOU to go over to discuss further, otherwise we're just discussing the same things again.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, I think Matt Schreiber, Matt, I think you kind of touched on a lot of the things that the language that the MOU should probably have, and Attorney Johnson as well. I think if you bring up back to the next cow, sort of modified MOU that we could discuss, I'm sure that would be probably best.
Okay.
Is it something you could throw on a DT agenda, since you have the city attorney, and just kind of,
Sure.
We have a meeting on Friday, so.
Okay. That sounds good. All right, thank you, Matt.
Yep.
And- all right. Matt's got a big night tonight. Yeah. All right, so number 8 then is review and discuss the SMA for the TAP grant, and for that, we also have Matt Schreiber. Thank you.
All right. All right, so as you can see in your packet, there's a draft SMA that I received from WISDOT for the TAP grant that we were awarded last September. Basically, the SMA details really the project expenses and how they're shared between the city and the state, and essentially who's responsible for which costs. As we discussed when we supported the grant application back in the last, it was the March of 2019, to be more competitive with the grant application, the design costs were all local, so covered locally, and then also the real estate costs are not covered by the SMA. So those are the two things I just wanted to make council aware of. The city attorney has reviewed the SMA. I think I got his email after I finished the memo on break here. So, and Paul didn't necessarily, he had a few comments that I think we'll incorporate into the final document, but he had no major concerns. I guess, Paul, if you have anything to add, please jump in. But that's
I agree with what you just said, Matt. The only question that I have is, because this is a DOT project and the city is going to be responsible for any real estate acquisition, that generally turns out to be a much more complicated process than if we were just not having to deal with the DOT. So that's the concern that I have right now, is figuring out exactly what the city's role in that is going to be. Other than that, I was fine with everything else.
Trina, we can hear your dog panting. We can hear your dog panting. That's okay. Okay, and I guess, yeah, what the attorney said. Just, oh, Kyle, did you?
I did just want to add in regards to the real estate acquisition. Jason Letha has informed us that there is another grant program that we may be able to pair with this one that would help with some of those costs related to the real estate acquisition. And we're currently exploring that, but I expect, if everything turns out as favorable as we might hope, that there'll be more information on that and make the project even less expensive and more affordable for the city. So stay tuned for more details on that.
Wonderful.
I did have one question, as far as the timeline of us getting this SMA kind of, buttoned up and put away. Are we working on a timeline where this needs to be done in a month or 2 weeks? Or do we have to have the SMA approved to start planning the project? Matt?
I was not given a strict guideline. I mean, I was given it basically right after the last meeting. Like literally, I think I got it the Wednesday. Well, actually, I think I got it the Tuesday of the last council meeting. So I just put it on the next council agenda just to get it approved. So if this went to the cow another meeting to get some of these answers or some of these questions answered, I don't think it's going to push the timeline back for DOT, or we're going to get, we're going to have the funding in jeopardy. I'll put it that way. They have not given me a drop dead date. I just obviously prefer to have it addressed as soon as possible.
Sure, I agree. But if there is any language that Attorney Johnson wants to try to introduce, or, maybe we have to bounce it to the state and they say we don't like that, or they don't care, it's probably worth trying to do that and make sure we do it right if we're not, up against a wall or any, tight timelines, I guess. We have a couple years to complete the project as well, so.
Yeah.
By 2026, so. But I'd like to keep the wheels moving as well.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for Matt? I don't see any at this point, so I think we're just gonna go ahead with that suggestion and move this back to another cow meeting, whether that's likely the next cow, Matt, you would assume?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just asking, would that likely be on the next cow agenda?
Oh, yeah, that would, yes.
Okay. All right, we'll sit back there then. Thank you. And so number 9 is review and discuss details of developing a downtown tax increment district. Matt, I still have you here.
Yep.
All right.
So I went through and updated basically the map that we had at the last meeting. I went through and updated that map to add a few areas that we discussed, and then included it for the 2020 tax year number and the assessed values to basically give us the current data that we had. And I included that in your packet. The other thing I did in the meantime was I spoke with Greg Johnson from Ellers, and he informed me that the cost for a project plan is $15,000. So to move forward with the creation of a TID, obviously we would utilize Ellers and their expertise to help us develop a project plan, and the cost for that would be $15,000. Much like the other TIFs, if the city paid for those funds up front, that once the increment has been generated, then the city can essentially reimburse itself for the project plan. So those are costs that the general fund could recoup at a certain point. So one of the other things that I wanted to include in the memo was a timeline, and I put 3 to 4 months. I know when we created TIF 5, and that's the TIF that we created over on James Street by Roberts Manufacturing on Continental Drive. We did that in roughly, we started in late July and we had it approved in mid-September. So it took 2.5 months. But I think if we did things at 3 to 4 months would probably be a good, I think, target and a fair target, to basically get this process along. And you can see here, basically, the steps that we need to do is, give Ellers a map of the proposed TID, have Ellers prepare a project plan, do the Class 2 notice, have a public hearing at Plan Commission. The Joint Review Board then meets and reviews the project plan. And then the Plan Commission approves the TID boundary, and then essentially the council reviews it, and then the Joint Review Board meets and gives final approval. The date the TID is created, though, is when council approves it. So that's the date that we would be working from the TID creation. Going to the map that I created, I broke it down by blocks, and you can see there's 11 blocks in the downtown area. For the most part, I tried to avoid the single-family homes and kept it to commercial development to the extent possible. You can see when you look at the breakdown by blocks that there's it would be 14.2 or just approximately 14.2 million in total value. And when you look at what is available, it's just over $17 million available in TIF capacity. So, and I know I said at a previous meeting that even creating the downtown TID would take up most of our capacity, but in 2 years, TID 3 will expire, which means 20 some million, I think it's $24 million of TID would go, or TID funds would go back to the city. So really, we'd be limited for the short term, but long term, I think we'd be fine with the creation of a downtown TID. I guess with that, I'll open it up with any questions. One thing I should add is I did add some blocks down on Water Street, so on both sides of James and Water, and then also the fire station and there's an office building over off of Ludington that were added based on previous conversations. So I guess with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Ian Gray?
I don't have any questions, but I think the way you revised the map and included the additional properties is perfect. I'm 100% for it. I think it's awesome. Thank you.
Mayor Tome?
Yeah, I don't really have a question either, Matt. I did have a question about the capacity, and you answered that already. And I think it's just most important to just get this started. And if the TIF had to be amended or possibly create a different TIF downtown to work with this in a couple years, I think the most important part is just getting it started. So I'm okay with the map the way that it is right now. This was something I talked about when I first ran for city council 8 years ago as a downtown TIF. So to see this coming to fruition and actually becoming a reality, I think is really good for the city. So thanks for your work on this, Matt.
Alder Reed?
Yeah, I'm going to concur with the mayor. One of the main things I wanted to improve when I joined city council was to find a way to give some incentives and improvements to the downtown district. So I'm super excited that we finally have a way to put some incentive out there.
Alder Pfeifferon? Paul?
I do have one question. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yep, we can hear you now.
Yes. Okay. Question regarding Block 8. That seemed like it's all city property. How does the TID work with city property? Just a question. We're not really going to revitalize that, are we?
We left it in there because there's really no harm to including it into a TIF district. And if something should happen in Block 8, obviously City Hall is not going anywhere, but you know, with the roadmap project, you know, there's upcoming decisions that are going to have to be made about you know, the senior center and other things long term. And we thought that there was an opportunity there to just include the land because you know, it doesn't impact anything because there's no improved value. So that was at the staff level something we discussed and thought it had some merit. So that's why we included it. Quite frankly, it doesn't need to be in the TIF district if council doesn't feel it's necessary. But you know, it was something that staff felt that it could be a benefit. So.
Thank you. I'll just ask you. We're curious.
Thank you. Alder Gray, did you want to speak again?
No, I think it should stay in the TIF district. I understand that we can revise this map later, but I think it's a good thing for it to be there, especially since there isn't a real impact. And with future potential changes with the senior center and things, it just makes sense for it to be there.
Okay. Alder McCabe.
I just wanted to say I agree. I'm all for this district, and I like the map, how it's much better than what was added and stuff, so. Good job, Matt, thank you.
Yep. I'm very excited about this as well, and I think the mayor and I both would really like to get this done before April. So I think I'm okay moving it forward. Sounds like the rest of you are too. So wonderful. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. Pleasure.
All right, number 10 is review and discuss resolution for the CDBG close application. It is the Matt Schreiber show tonight,
Yeah.
and he is still here.
I am been working hard at putting together the CDBG close application that needs to go to DOA. So council's aware over the last 2 years, that we've gone through this process to hand over our funds to DOA, and then we selected the projects for stormwater mitigation stormwater projects that would mitigate flooding issues and directly benefit LMI individuals. I've gone through a survey to basically verify that to meet the DOA or the DOA's actually it's HUD's requirements, but it's through DOA. So now we're to the point where I have to compile this application, and there's like a checklist that is very, very long. And one of the things is I need a resolution from council basically supporting or to support the submittal of the grant application. And then I listed a few other things where I'm gonna need the signature from the mayor and or the clerk to submit to DOA with the application. And there, in my research as I was typing this up, there is an additional resolution that probably should be a separate action at the next council agenda. So essentially, there's the bullet points of the authorizing resolution, there's the statement of assurances, the lobbying certification, the potential fair housing actions checklist, which even though ours isn't a housing project, we still have to do. The citizen participation public hearing certification form, which we've already had the public hearing. And then we have to have a resolution for the policy for nonviolent civil rights demonstration, prohibiting the use of excessive force and barring entrances and exits. So these are requirements that we have to complete, and they give us basically either sample resolutions or forms. I've had Paul look at both the resolutions. Other than needing to clean them up, I don't think he had any major concerns. But this is where we're at. At the next meeting, I'm going to have the complete application in there so you can see what's going to be submitted to DOA. Right now, I'm working with DOA to basically, tell them or show them what we're going to be submitting. So when we submit it, here this month, that basically it's somewhat pre-approved. I guess with that, I'll open it up for any questions on any of these forms or what we need to do.
Sounds like pretty simple stuff, Matt.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting this all together. Were there any questions?
No questions. Thanks again, Matt. You pretty much own the whole agenda this evening. I know that
Yeah.
this is a lot to navigate, and thanks for getting us to this point. But as soon as you have things ready for the council to take action on, I think you should, I'm in favor of bringing them forward for consideration.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no questions, I think we can just move this along. Thank you very, very much, Matt. And we will move on then to number 11, which is review and discuss the details and options for a stormwater utility or a transportation utility. And this evening, I think Kyle Ellefson, our city administrator, is actually going to be heading this one off and give Matt a little breather there.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to give just a very brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over shortly to Ed Maxwell, I believe, with Rupert Milkie. We also have Bridget with Rupert Milkie, and Jason Letha is also here in case they need to kind of chime in and give us just a short description of, sort of what is a transportation utility, what they're seeing out there with other communities, and what some of the high points are. Then I'll follow that up with some more specific information about some projections that we put together so we kind of understand the scope of what we're looking at. I will say that there's a little urgency in the discussion, and it depends on which solution the council is most comfortable moving towards. With the transportation utility, we have a lot more time to take the steps necessary to implement that. If we decide to stay on the path of a stormwater utility, we do have to get that language approved in order to make the April ballot as far as referendum language, and we would have to have that language in 2 weeks ready for approval. So that is the only element of urgency, is that we need to decide if we're going the referendum route stormwater utility wise, or if we're going to choose the transportation utility as maybe a better path. I think in the memo, hopefully you had a chance to read it maybe a couple times, but there's a description of the stormwater utility. I feel like we've gone over that pretty extensively in the past several months. So this is more of a description, or the learning points here are more about the transportation utility and some of the elements regarding how Columbus could use a transportation utility to solve transportation issues, but also potentially also solve stormwater issues at the same time. So I think now's a good time to kick it over to Ed Maxwell, and he will give us the rundown of kind of the structure of transportation utilities.
Thanks, Kyle, and thanks to everybody for having me. I've been with R&M about 3 years. I'm in the finance department, so is my colleague Bridget, who's here with me. We gave a full hour-long webinar on transportation utilities recently, but I'm going to give you the 5-minute version, and if you have more questions, we can do a deeper dive. We've fielded quite a bit of interest on transportation utilities from clients across the state. People are really interested in this because they really feel caught between a rock and a hard place. They have strict levy limits, yet they have deteriorating roads, and they can only borrow so much. So they're looking for alternative funding mechanisms, and a lot of them are turning to transportation utilities to explore. And I think the League of Municipalities really sort of hastened this by issuing a legal opinion a few months ago saying, we think this is a very viable funding mechanism to deal with your transportation needs. Now, a transportation utility isn't a separate entity. It's not like a water utility or a sewer utility that has its own staff and its own functions. It's very similar to a stormwater utility in that it's housed within or together with another department. It's essentially a way to provide funding for what you need to do, to fill that sort of funding gap between what the tax levy can provide for and what you really need to do. Another interesting application, they can be used as a substitute for special assessments. The city of Neenah enacted a transportation utility fee a couple years ago to do away with special assessments because they were so wildly unpopular. And the village of Kimberly up in the Fox Valley recently followed suit as well. So that's another way you can use it. And these fees can cover capital expenditures, and they can cover O&M expenses as well. They're not nearly as limited as some other funding mechanisms that you can come across. Grants are generally very targeted, and they're also a one-time use, whereas these are an ongoing source of revenue for you. And in terms of how you set up the fees, there are a lot of different options. The most popular one seems to be based on a estimated traffic by land use. So you assess a parcel based on its land use and come up with an estimate for how many trips would come to and from that piece of land to get an estimate for how much does it use the transportation system available. And from there, these fees would go on a utility bill. Developed parcel, just like water and sewer charges. So they're definitely not a tax. They're separate and distinct from taxes. And with any funding mechanism, there are pros and cons. So I think there are a distinct number of advantages to going this route. The first is that anyone can set these up. Any municipality can set one up. You don't have to have a lot of future growth like you might need with impact fees or something like that. It's also a steady, reliable stream of revenue. It's not a one-off like a grant, and it's not something you need to redo each time there's a project like a special assessment. They're also very versatile. They don't have a lot of limitations on them. Like for instance, with impact fees, you get quite a few restrictions. They can't be used for O&M. They can't be used to buy vehicles. That's not the case with these fees. The only real restrictions they have is those dollars can't be used for snow plowing or street sweeping, or they'll count against the levy. But there are so many other expenditures that they can be used for, that's hardly a limitation at all. Another advantage of this is you don't need a referendum. You can simply create one, though I do recommend involving the public in the process. Most importantly, it really gives you the dollars you need to address the issues that are facing you, stormwater and road related. But there's a flip side. There are some cons to it that I do want to point out. One is that it's a relatively new concept. It's popular in other states, but Wisconsin hasn't seen many of them to date. So I would expect there will likely be some legal challenges, especially for municipalities who don't carefully construct the fees and make sure there's a good relationship between the costs and the fees themselves. They can also be regressive. In other words, you can charge everyone the same fee for residential properties, although the fees are generally pretty small in nature, so it's not a terrible burden. And the last one I want to point out is it can have some impact on state aid, though you can mitigate that impact by making sure it's not your only funding source or your primary funding source for roads. There's not a one-for-one relationship with matching state aid. In other words, if you take $1 from the transportation utility to spend it on a transportation-related item, you won't lose $1 in state aid. It's something much smaller. And we can go into the formula if you want, but it's 8:15, so I won't get into the nitty-gritty on that unless you want me to. But all that being said, I think it's a very viable funding option that is worth considering because of the flexibility and because it can help you meet your needs. So, Jason, unless you have anything to add, I'll kick it back over to the administrator who can go into a little bit more specifics on how this might look for Columbus.
I did just want to ask at this point if for citizens this evening wanted to chime in before, or would you rather wait for further discussion?
I'd rather wait to hear the discussion.
Okay. Does anybody have any immediate questions for Ed Maxwell or Alder Gray?
My big question would be, if we decided to go the route of a transportation utility, would we be able to fund all of the things that we need for stormwater mitigation? Because a lot of them do not relate directly to transportation.
Correct. Actually, I think Kyle is ready to answer something of that nature for you. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I think maybe if I go through the rest of it, then maybe some of the information I have will answer some of the questions that are out there. But just to kind of jump off, I think the important thing to recognize with that question is, if we decide to establish a transportation utility, it, just like the stormwater utility, all the expenses need to be really dedicated to transportation. All the revenue we collect has to be matched up with an eligible transportation expense. So collecting money on the transportation side to use for stormwater wouldn't be something we would be doing. I'll kind of wrap around back to that, but I think by identifying this different revenue source, and actually a larger revenue source than we're currently able to allocate to transportation with our regular maintenance of mill and overlay and slurry seal and things like that, that would free up money in the general fund to immediately go towards the stormwater improvements, while at the same time spending more money on the direct maintenance of the roads. But like I said, I'll wrap back to that. I did want to touch on the type or the measurement or the construct, I guess, of the fee structure. And we did propose it in the traffic count format. It could also be done with impervious surface area on parcels, could be done by street frontage, and other methods. I think the traffic count method is probably the most directly correlated to using the transportation system. And so I think that's probably the safest method to use if we're going to, tie the charges to the actual expenses. But that is up for discussion if there's a different method that we would prefer. I think some of the considerations that you have to look at, there is the special assessment element there, that you can go years and years and years without paying a special assessment, but when it's your road that gets redone, you could suddenly be subjected to hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars of special assessments. This would eliminate that potentially, and would also give you the flexibility to look back a certain amount of time to people that have recently paid special assessments, to say there would maybe be some kind of forgiveness period to recognize if you were in the past, say, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, had paid a special assessment, you would get some sort of reduced rate moving forward for a certain number of years. So that's something that can be incorporated, so eliminates maybe the pain of special assessments and spreads it out over a larger group, so nobody at any one time is paying such a large assessment, but also recognizes that if we're switching methods on funding road construction, there should be some consideration. I think the state aid is an important thing to understand. I'll get into the numbers just here in a little bit. There is a very complicated formula. It considers a lot of things. And so worst case scenario, if we took the money that we are currently spending on mill and overlay and slurry seal and just spent it on something completely unrelated to transportation or any other eligible expense, say we decided to put a new roof on City Hall, that none of that money is going to be allocated or considered in that formula, and they do it on a 6-year kind of rolling basis. So if we found a different use for that money for all 6 years, based on the current numbers, we would be looking at losing about $17,000 a year in state aid. But things like stormwater, the capital expenses are often able to be included in that formula. So there's a potential, if we plan the expenses right, that if we increase our spending on stormwater related things, that some of that, maybe 60-65% of that, could be included in the formula and would reduce any state aid we might lose. So I think that's an important consideration. One other thing, sort of on the flip side is, when we talk about the transportation needs that we have, and we look at what we think the total stormwater needs we have, I think the transportation infrastructure, just maintaining it, probably outstrips the amount of resources needed for some of the stormwater improvements. So there's a greater infrastructure burden on transportation-related infrastructure that we currently have and need to maintain versus what we think the potential stormwater improvements are. That being said, we're not trying to fund this at 100%. I think historically we've used $500,000 as what we'd like to spend sort of on average each year. And that ends up being a very difficult threshold to meet. It's only with large projects that you have to borrow for that you're really able to get up to that dollar amount. So the utility, as it's designed here, and it can be tweaked, isn't designed to fund 100% of the road costs. It's about 50% is the number that we selected, but basically you could peg that number at anything you wanted, and then the rates would be, sort of configured accordingly. So I did send out a very kind of back of the napkin calculation, and so everyone should have it in their email. And so I just wanted to run through just a little bit of what I'm showing in there, and then see if there's any questions on it, and then we'll kind of wrap back around here. As you can see, what we did, or actually, I mean, to give credit, I think Ed did most of this work, but we took the parcels we had and the types of parcels we had, and the number of units, the number of homes, and the number of commercial businesses. The only thing that isn't in here is the tax-exempt parcels, and that would actually either increase the amount of revenue or decrease the rate that everyone would pay. But essentially, that's how we figured out, and then there's a manual that's the Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, 8th edition, in case anyone has one at home. And it goes by different classes of uses, basically. And through some sort of statistical method, they came up with numbers that you can then apply without every individual community doing a study about, how their residential units perform with daily trips compared to other places. It's something you can rely on. It's scientifically based, but relieves you of that burden of having to actually go through a study on your own. And so through applying the number of trips per parcel per use, essentially, they come up with a total number of trips per year, and then they figure out how that correlates to the cost per year or your need for transportation spending, and then it comes down to a fee per 100 trips. And you can kind of extrapolate that out then over the year and figure out what your annual cost and what your monthly cost is, not including the nonprofits. You can see it's just over $6 a month for a residential unit. And then the commercial and industrial, each would be individually calculated based on what their size, their characteristics, and they would be put into a use category based on that manual to determine their actual fee or actual charge. And so there is, some of the information in here was data that was generated, I think, in 2011, and I think it's been sort of moved forward with some anticipated expense increases. So we kind of, if we were going to spend $500,000 before, 657 might be the right number now, based on inflation and how costs increase. So that's kind of what we're looking at for most residential users. In this format here, it would be about $6 a month. And what that would net you at the end of the year or collectively through the year would be about $328,000. Which, if we dedicated that to projects like a combination of mill and overlay, slurry seal, and then also setting some aside for larger projects and special assessments, you could accomplish a significantly larger amount of work, either directly or through leveraging borrowing, because you could essentially, do twice as much borrowing if you're spending or collecting twice as much revenue to pay for it. So that's kind of the structure of how it could work. Again, these numbers could be moved around as far as what percentage of the total need you want to fund. And then as it relates to stormwater, I think the important part is that the stormwater, we would be able to then take the money that normally comes out of the general fund for the transportation expenses now and quickly put that into stormwater improvements that I know Parkview, they've communicated they have a desire to see some relatively simple improvements, and so we might be able to accomplish some of that work in the next several years. Looking backwards, I think it was about $80,000 to open up the Second Ward Creek, and so if you look at projects of that size and what you could accomplish in several years, you could have a significant amount of work done on stormwater. At the same time, you continue and increase your transportation expenditures. So I think if done correctly, it could be a win-win on both sides, stormwater and transportation. And I think when you look at the feedback that we've gotten on residents or from residents, flooding is always a concern and is an important issue, and we certainly want to continue making progress in that. But I think when you look at the information we have from 2009, 2011, even during the 2050 plan, what people say about their desires for transportation spending and improvements on the roads, and even their willingness to pay extra to fund more improvements on the roads, I think the residents have over time made it clear that these are priorities and they're willing to pay for something. And I think particularly if we can guarantee what we're collecting is going right for that cause and can't go for anything else. So that's the information I had, and I think now is if there's any questions for me or any of the Rupert Milky staff.
Thank you, Kyle. I just wanted to start off and say thank you for putting all this together. It's very helpful. I guess I was struggling with the idea that we would have to put a stormwater utility, explain the stormwater utility referendum question to the public so quickly at this point. And I think, although this doesn't directly address stormwater, I think anything that you can do to fund these issues that we face as a community in funding, whether it's the stormwater, whether it's the transportation and the roads, is going to be helpful. But I think you're absolutely correct when you state that it really does just depend on the plan process of how the city chooses to spend the money. Obviously, in this case, if a utility was created for transportation, it would have to be used specifically for that reason. I just wanted to also point out that, we've borrowed quite a bit in recent years to fund these larger road projects. And there's no saying that we could not borrow to fund a larger stormwater project, should the council so choose. So I do think that it's just, we're much more likely to get the funding I think that we need in general by going this route. That's my opinion, instead of trying to push through a stormwater utility sort of at the last minute. That makes me nervous. I don't know if that's something that's going to work out. Whereas this one, I think, it's sort of easy to identify the need that's there, and then also, create more room in the budget overall for additional needs that I think most of council agrees that we do need. All right, I think Alder Gray, you had your hand up first.
Thank you. So I think transportation utility could be a great idea. I do not believe we should be talking about it at the same time as our our potential stormwater utility. It does not solve the problem of stormwater. Saying that we could potentially have more money in the budget to spend on stormwater maintenance if we have a transportation utility is not a logical approach, in my opinion, because the city has not adequately addressed stormwater for a long time. Just because we have more money for roads doesn't mean we're all of a sudden going to start addressing stormwater. I think it needs to be addressed separately. We need a separate budget for stormwater so that it is addressed. It's going to be something that's going to get worse and worse as time goes on. and the stormwater utility still needs to happen so that we have a fixed income to address it. This, while I think it's great, I would not be opposed to moving forward with both utilities, although I don't think we should do both at the same time. But I think we need to still do the stormwater utility. I think this would be a good way to lower the overall tax levy in the future if we had both utilities, because we could potentially lower the levy. But I do still firmly believe we need to address stormwater, and we need specific funds in order to do that. Otherwise, future councils and staff and mayors will not necessarily do it, just like they haven't in the past.
Alder Reed.
I'm going to mostly agree with Gray. I would like to see these as two separate utilities. I don't want to have to worry about, finding the bean under the correct cup, or however that game works, for getting the stormwater issues to be fixed. I think there will be a decent amount of support at the idea. Anything that'll help a bit with flooding, I think there'll be, pretty positive public response. I don't know if we should go, water utility plus transportation utility. If it's $5 a month for each, that would equal, like $120. So that would be more than the $75 we're thinking of asking yearly for, residents. I was a little concerned with the idea of asking almost $700 for commercial properties for transportation. I don't know if that would include a lot of the small downtown businesses. I don't know that they would be able to, afford it that easily.
I'm going to chime in here. Kyle, so at the end of this memo, it says, to be clear, in the interest of establishing a utility to fund improvements, staff suggests the council move forward with either a stormwater utility or a transportation utility, not both.
Correct. That is completely a staff recommendation. Being sort of a fan of incrementalism, I thought putting two charges on at the same time, maybe a little bit more of a burden.
To clarify, I guess you're suggesting not at the same time.
Correct. If the council is dedicated to stormwater improvements and they don't want to do it through a stormwater utility, we could also consider identifying projects, borrowing, bonding basically for the projects, which makes you commit to a use for that it can only be used for. With bonds, you cannot take stormwater improvement money that you told people you were borrowing for a purpose and use it for playground equipment. So you would then make sure you have an enduring commitment from future councils to spend the money on those projects. I think they're both worthwhile expenses. I don't think it's a matter of one being, not worthy and the other one being worthy. I think I look at the scope of what we have to accomplish and the scope of what we have available to accomplish it with. And I see the transportation situation as needing far more resources over a longer period of time, but also having that short-term benefit. At the same meeting tonight, we also have moved forward stormwater improvements of $423,000 that we feel pretty confident are going to be funded and occur in the next several years. And with those improvements, that may make some of the other improvements less urgent or less necessary, or easier to accomplish with funds on hand. So we could certainly move forward with both. One of them will require a referendum. The other one doesn't require a referendum. So just as sort of in an effort of staff to try to keep the charge to a single charge, we thought there's the high potential we could accomplish two things with one action and make it a little more streamlined. But we're really open to any solutions.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify if that was, yeah, if you're suggesting you shouldn't do both whatsoever, or if you know, shouldn't do both at the same time, maybe, I think for me, it's just the challenge of like, April is not that far away. And to be able to inform the entire community about the stormwater utility and exactly what it is and have it go to referendum, that's a very short window of time to ask, you know, to educate the entire electorate. I'm not sure, I apologize, guys. Who had their hand up first? I think was it Adams or Miss Reed? Trina?
Oh, yeah, I would like to, look into the possibility of putting stormwater on the referendum for this coming April. I think a couple months is enough time to get the message out. And then for the possible transportation utility, I like to have a discussion of transportation utility versus possible wheel tax in the future.
So, Trina, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna clarify. So you want to do both right now? And, or,
I mean, in the near future, but I wanted to look at the possibility of how each funding mechanism would work if we were going to put a transportation utility together versus having a possible wheel tax when people renew their vehicles.
okay. Alder Adams?
Okay, so kind of a quick summation, and then I'll make a point. So if I'm understanding this correctly, if we do the transportation utility, that is something that we don't need to get on the referendum. And with the revenue that we get from that every year, we're able to borrow more in bonds for yeah. And so I think that's where that win-win comes into play. And if we can work it so that once we get that utility in, then we lock that money in bonds to the sewage or the flood mitigation, I think that's a win right there. Because then it's you don't have to rely on the yes/no votes. We can just go do it. We can get the roads done, and then we have a little extra borrowing power to get the flooding areas taken care of. That's my own 2 cents. If I'm correct in what I said in my summation.
Administrator Ellison, I'm gonna let him chime in.
Yeah, we did miss just a little bit of it on the connection here. But yes, I think you would have the ability with that transportation money to do anything you wanted related to transportation, whether it would be take out a large amount of debt service and then pay it back with the transportation revenue you collected, or if you wanted to just increase the amount of regular maintenance you did out of the operating budget, the general fund operating budget. If you took, and at the bottom of that calculation sheet, I just had some numbers for kind of reference of the numbers we're talking about. In 2020, we had about $85,000 between the mill and overlay and slurry sealing. We have about $95,000 in the 2021 budget. So if you're looking at collecting about $328,000 in the calculation, you'd be more than tripling the amount of money that we currently allocate to those activities. You could choose to then, keep the general fund spending towards transportation, in which case you would ultimately quadruple it. My recommendation here to, kind of meet both goals would be to reallocate that $95,000 that would have gone to road maintenance and put it towards stormwater maintenance right away and begin those projects. But you would have the flexibility to kind of structure it how you wanted. You could go debt heavy and accomplish a lot right away, or you could be a more pay-as-you-go or a blend. But the room in the budget to accommodate stormwater only happens if you take the money that's currently allocated to maintenance of the roads and move it to the transportation fund. And then one thing I forgot before, if we're gonna look at a transportation utility, if it's gonna be a utility, it has to be based on usage. And if we wanna charge people $75 a car like a wheel tax, that's a tax. The utility is based on usage, and so if a residential use has an average of, you know, X number of trips per year, the best way to not have it be a tax is to say a gas station of 4,000 square feet, you know, with 20 pumps is going to generate far more uses per year transportation-wise than a residence. They have to pay a different amount to reflect their usage of the transportation infrastructure. And similarly, you know, if you're a 500 square foot storefront in downtown Columbus, your rating should also reflect the amount of traffic you're expected to generate. So theirs would be much lower than a grocery store, for example. So it should be kind of based on the individual uses and the characteristics of each of those parcels, which would have to be done, you know, as part of creating this. So there would be differentiation between uses and volumes.
Thank you. Okay, Alder Gray.
And so, just real quickly, I wanted to make sure, since what Alder Adams said, the money does not automatically go to Storm. It would be something that this council and future councils would have to allocate. There would be no money going to Storm usage if we adopted a transportation utility. That's not how it works. The big thing is a transportation utility does not require referendum, as was said. The storm utility does. So why don't we at least attempt the storm utility? We can add a transportation utility at any point in time. We need to get going on a referendum if we want to add the stormwater utility. If the stormwater utility doesn't succeed, we could add a transportation utility immediately thereafter, or try again. But either way, I think the transportation utility is a good idea. I don't think we should do it right now because I really believe we need the stormwater utility and we shouldn't do both at the same time. And while the time is tight to get it going and to get public information out there, we really need the stormwater utility. We need to at least try.
I don't know, I don't disagree that we need, whether it's a stormwater utility or the city just needs to generally fund these stormwater projects and have a commitment to it. And how we go about that, I'm not sure. There's plenty of different ways, but I think that's my bottom line, is that does need to be addressed. The other issue I have is that, you know, Ian brought up, well, you know, we could create this transportation utility at any time. We could do that the day after. I'm not sure that that's necessarily possible because we don't know who's going to be sitting up here in this seat or on these Zoom screens in April, and nor do we know if we have support for that. So I'm just throwing that out there, that's not necessarily a given, that's going to be what the consensus is if a referendum fails for the stormwater utility. And Mayor Tolman would like to chime in with, he's got a slide on there too.
Yeah, well, first, you know, I just learned about this recently, and I really like the idea of the transportation utility because it offers a lot of different flexibility in it. I was quite surprised to know that something like this existed when we were already talking about the creation of a stormwater utility and all the steps and processes that you have to go through to create that. So I like the flexibility here. I think, as you kind of point out in the memo, you know, as long as I've lived in Columbus in 20 years, the number one complaint is always going to be that, hey, the streets are terrible there. That's not different from other communities as well, but it's a challenge that we're all facing, and I think it's the biggest financial challenge that small communities or any community is facing right now, because it turns into constant borrowing. And I think when we went through the 2050 planning process and looking at financials for the future, you know, that's what I was trying to focus on, is how can we eliminate the continued borrowing for every street project, when the only thing that we're really levying for annually is the debt payment to that, or $75,000 in street maintenance. So I don't think that's the approach that has gotten us very far. I think that we have definitely improved things in the last couple of years, and looking at Hibbert Street project, and the grant, et cetera. We got a lot done this year. So that's why I like the idea of creating this utility, because once you take that borrowing schedule and you say, okay, we're gonna get $300,000 a year, instead of borrowing $500,000 a year, it reduces your general obligation debt levy immediately. I think it's smarter to do it that way, because you have the flexibility to spend the money on different maintenance products as well, that I generally have been opposed to borrowing for, because I don't think you should take out a 20-year bond for a mill and overlay. I've argued against that for the last 8 years, but I think if you're getting that money annually, you can start repairing those streets with those means, rather than waiting for a reconstruct and not maintaining the street for 20 years. So I think this addresses those issues, but I do agree the stormwater projects need to be addressed. I don't personally have a lot of faith that getting this on the ballot in April is going to create a stormwater utility. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not psychic. That's just my general feeling. But to kind of ramrod this through at the next meeting, and to get the potential for a stormwater utility on the ballot, have it fail, and wait for 4 months when we have this option, I think it does effectively, take care of two problems with one issue. You just have to have the commitment, and you have to put it on the capital project schedule to know that we're gonna be spending money on stormwater, that we're not borrowing, I guess, for streets that we're collecting annually. I think just in the public perception as well, people want to see more investment into the streets. Stormwater is an issue, it is, but it's not as big of an issue as streets are. And you can look at any polling the city's done in the last 10 years, and that's just a fact. But I think it's just an easier way to get to where we ultimately want to go, is by reducing the GO debt, reducing the borrowing for street reconstruction and repairs, and increasing the money that we're spending on stormwater. And I think this is possible. The fact that we could do this in the next 4 months, there's some surety that we can do this and at least take a positive step forward, rather than waiting for the potential of a referendum to fail, which the city doesn't have a very good history of passing referendums. That we have something that we know that we can do. And if this didn't work, the city could, work a year on creating a stormwater utility as well, but I think this is the surest bet to taking a step forward.
Okay, I think it was Alder Adams.
I just wanted to, I think I inartfully stated this point previously, so I'll try and state it again. So with the extra revenue that we get from the transportation utility, then we could use some of that revenue for the stormwater projects, but I believe that also gives us more borrowing power, if I understood that correctly, for stormwater projects.
No.
Am I correct in assuming that?
Well, technically, Pete, I think where you're confused is that we're going to collect money for transportation. For transportation, which is going to then open up the general fund to, essentially, because we're collecting money for the transportation for the roads, we don't have to spend as much on road maintenance. So therefore, we could allocate those dollars then to the stormwater.
Okay, I just wanted to make that distinction, so, okay, I got that straight.
So, and then if you wanted to, you could bond.
Sorry, go ahead.
If you wanted to, you could borrow or bond more for a larger stormwater project, if you're not borrowing or bonding for larger projects, transportation projects. Yes,
Or for the road projects.
correct.
Yeah, I still say we go with the transportation projects, way more flexibility and way more options there. And I think over the long haul, I think that's gonna be better. That's my own 2 cents.
Okay, and I apologize, is this, Alder Gray, were you next?
It doesn't
ahead.
make, I think all of us have been raising our hand throughout.
Yeah.
I'll go real quick. I think the big thing we have to keep in mind is stormwater is not a sexy issue, and that's why it hasn't happened. If we have an opportunity to create a stormwater utility, we should at least try to do it. Streets are something the city, every resident wants and will always want. Every member sitting on the council and the mayor will always support them. Otherwise, they will never sit on council or be mayor. And a transportation utility is something that the future council could easily adopt and will support almost certainly, because it is a sexy issue that every constituent is going to want their council, their alderperson to support. And it doesn't need a referendum. It's easily done at any time. This is something that we should at least attempt to do, because we can do the transportation utility at any time. And plus, you can look at it both ways. If we have a stormwater utility, that also frees up money that we would have to spend from the general fund on stormwater that could be spent on roads. You can look at it that way too. The logic of saying a transportation utility will help stormwater is not, it doesn't track. It's not logical. You could apply that same logic to saying, if we have a stormwater utility, guess what? Now that frees up money in the general fund and we can fix more roads. It's the same thing. It's not, they do not correlate to each other, so we should stop pretending that they do.
I don't disagree with that, Ian. I think that the challenge for me is trying to pull together a referendum by April. And I guess I can't wrap my head around how we're assuming that that's an easy feat. Trina, I'm going to let you go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I'm very excited to learn about the existence of transportation utilities. I had no idea those were things. But I do want to give the stormwater a chance and try for that for April, and then look into the transportation utility options. I really don't see that many of the things I want to fix and amend with stormwater will have anything to do with transportation or roads. I just don't think one is going to help the other that much.
Mayor Tom.
Again, I think, Katie, you kind of said, we know what we can do right now and we know what's possible. I think to talk about the fact that previous mayors or city councils didn't do anything about stormwater is probably not a very fair statement. They probably didn't do enough, and we've gotten to the situation where, it's been put upon us to come up with a long-term plan or solution. That's why we talked about creating the potential stormwater utility. The transportation utility was something that I didn't know about, but to assert that since it doesn't say stormwater utility, the city's never going to address that issue. Every dollar that comes into the city that's levied it's equal competition. Any city council can decide, I'm going to fix this problem by, getting rid of this or selling off our wastewater utility. I don't think it's a very fair argument when I think everybody's trying to head in the same direction right now, is to deal with stormwater issues and ongoing transportation funding. That's something that's not going to go away in April. I agree with Katie. I think trying to inform the public on accepting a stormwater utility and getting all the details worked out between now and April and focusing our energy on that it basically, we're taking the harder path, and by not creating or talking about the transportation utility and really drilling down into the details and understanding of what type of money we can generate with that, and also commit to spending those by creating a fund, by creating a stormwater fund to say, here's how much we're going to put in to the budget annually to do this. We have to do that with everything else. We have to replace vehicles. We have capital projects every year. So I just feel like not taking the transportation utility seriously. I don't think that this is something that's going to be available forever. As was mentioned during the presentation, I think that there's going to be a certain limit to the state figuring out that municipalities are kind of doing this, and then maybe they want to start micromanaging the numbers, or looking at this differently. So I think it's an opportunity that's new that we should deeply, look at and consider before just throwing it away for 4 months and going down the path of the stormwater utility that I think you have a 50-50 chance at right now.
Kyle would like to chime in for a moment.
Just quickly, I think what this is highlighting is what we have is a money issue where we have more problems that need fixing and addressing than we have resources available. And much of that has to do with state structure and regulation on how much our levy can go up and some of the state aids and things like that. But, I haven't been here for very long, but I think as I've worked with this city council and I look at working with future city councils, I just have a lot of faith that future councils are going to do what you guys are doing and make the best decisions for the city of Columbus. So I don't think the actions of future councils worry me as much as what the state legislature is likely to do. A decade ago, there were some really popular things that helped municipalities fund some of these things, like stormwater utilities. And as soon as it became popular, it suddenly was put on the list of, you can create one, but for every dollar you collect, you basically have to then subtract it from your levy if it was previously funded by the general fund. We're getting into a legislative session right now. Once this gets on the floor, it doesn't take very long for this to be something that you can absolutely create this transportation utility, except for we're going to subtract $1 off of your levy limit for every dollar you collect. And now we're back in the same boat where we can do it, but now you have to go to referendum and go through a long process with language and explanation. And, I think when we look at what the residents have expressed, we know transportation is important, but I think we can still accomplish both. And I think just like, everyone here is making the best decision, I just think future councils are going to approach it in the same manner. And when we have needs, they're going to put the money towards them. And we can identify projects in the next 3 months and, put plans in place to get that stuff going and commit the money. You can borrow the money in the next 3 months for a project and then spend the next 4 years paying it back. Once the debt is issued, you're really locked in. They can't do much about it. They have to find the money for that debt service. So, if there's some true concerns, I think there's ways to really, again, make sure there's that enduring commitment. But I just worry that the groundwork is going to change before we know it. And what we think is we could do anytime may not be an option.
Thanks, Kyle. Alder Pfeifferon?
I think there are some, obviously the two issues are huge, transportation and stormwater. I agree that I don't see as separate line items, if you will. I think that the stormwater, it depends on who you asked and where you asked and whatever, but they're both equally important, like the transportation and the stormwater. I would have no problem putting a referendum for the stormwater soon and then attempting the transportation, shortly thereafter. However, I would not even be opposed to waiting a little bit longer on the stormwater. I know that's not a popular answer, but to do it right, I don't feel we should rush it necessarily. And if we have only 2 months to get it done, I just fear that we might be rushing it too much to think about all of the repercussions or what.
I got most of that, Paul. You were breaking up a little bit. That's okay. That's okay. Thank you. Alder Adams.
I got a quick question for Kyle. So when you're talking about the legislature and passing a law, which would basically for every dollar we get in the transportation utility, we have to take that off the levy. If we were to get this transportation utility now, and then they change it, would we be grandfathered in or would we still be subjected to the, for every dollar we take in, we have to take it off the levy? I don't know if that's how that would work.
It would be specific to the legislation they crafted. Oftentimes, what I see is whatever the trigger for the legislature to act, if it is something that's coming up, they might just say everything that, before a certain date's allowed, anything after a certain date is not allowed or would be under new restrictions. If it's something that happened in the last year, we could go through this step and adopt one and then find out next year that we're suddenly under new regulation and we're penalized. The sooner we adopt it, the less likely we are to be caught in that trap, so to speak.
I think that's the timeline that's driving me right now, is knowing that if we look in this direction and we can act pretty quickly and start learning more about the steps needed to be taken, we're still going to have a public hearing. The public's going to have to be made aware of what we're trying to do here. I think the other part of this too is that if this opportunity is only going to exist for a short period of time, I would rather seize that opportunity. If the creation of the stormwater utility has always been there and will always be there, if it goes through a referendum, that can also be, exercised, but maybe we do a little bit more education to the public to make sure that if we take it to a referendum, it doesn't fail. Because what I'm afraid of is if it fails once, no one's going to bring it back again. They're going to say, well, that's not popular, and so then you're back to where we are right now, is finding another way to fund it without having the utility created. So I do think that there is kind of that artificial timeline in my head that's rolling around about, here's an opportunity. If you want to go this way, you can create the transportation utility later, maybe, or maybe the state's on to the local municipality and you've kind of lost that opportunity. And it wasn't something I knew about until just a few months ago. And if I had known about this earlier, would be something I would have been more interested in before we began the discussion of the stormwater utility, just knowing that it would free up funds for stormwater projects.
Okay, at this point, I guess, sorry, go ahead, Mike McCabe.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, to me, it sounds like obviously I was in favor of the storm utility, still am. As a referendum, if it goes that way, that's fine, let the people speak, but it seems to me like this transportation utility is also a good deal and more of a chance of getting some of these projects on the books, and instead of maybe going to referendum, having it fail, and then we're back to ground zero. So, not that that helps any, but I guess I'm pro transportation utility.
I think the concern is that, we have approximately 2 months if we want to create a stormwater utility to really get the public educated about that referendum that would need to pass. So I think, if there weren't any time obligation, I would really just say, hey, let's bring this back at this point to another cow. Let's all process this. But I think that's the challenge, is that, okay, so if we wait on that at all, then we're, also cutting into the time that we are using to educate the public about that stormwater utility that's already very limited. So I guess I have to ask individuals, I think at this point, for, what's their stance, I guess, which one do you want to do and which one do you want to do first? I think what I also wanted to do is, so we'll ask that, but before we do the two individuals who have joined us, one, Ron Curtis is here in person this evening at City Hall, and then I also have Max Chu on Zoom. Did either one of you two want to speak to this?
Max, if he wants to.
Sure. Max, would you like to comment at all, now that you've heard the discussion?
Sure. Thank you so much for continuing to pick up this issue. I understand that basically there's uncertainty as to how voters will vote on a quick referendum. We have uncertainty as to what the legislature will do in terms of the levy rules. So neither are guarantees, and I don't think that we could bank decisionally on either going up or down. But I would say that not having perspective, but having the perspective of simply a resident and outsider of this council, I would say that the perception is that our property values have gone up, that there is always going to be a limited amount of funds, both from the residents and from the city. And without a plan of action, I don't know that there would be a widespread support for anything further. But given just the opportunity to voice for the timing of such expansions in the utility costs, I think would be very meaningful. I think that would be well received. I think that, as Elder Gray said, it's not a sexy issue, but as a team that has to lead by courage and with a certain amount of vision, you understand the idea that if you were to do a failure modes effect analysis, the remediation costs of a section of road or flooding, one, certainly you have a lot more roads that probably need help. However, the catastrophic amount of damage that occurs during a single flood for a number of residents can grow very, very quickly. And I think that the question is not being well framed in how much we will have to pay in emergency services should we have one of those events, which over the last couple of years, as previously documented in these meetings, committees of the whole, it could be quite substantial. In fact, I believe that one of the most recent projects, which is highly contributing toward the Parkview flooding, was the result of such an emergency action. So I would encourage you guys to think, instead of saying what future councils will do, we can judge that by what previous councils have done. And that this issue, despite the excellent work done in mapping out the flooding issues, simply hasn't been forcefully or deliberately addressed for a while. The idea of a shell game with the money is honestly beyond me. I'm a civil engineer, finances, more power to you, Ed. But I would say that if you told me that there is a plan of action, a priority list, that someone has comprehensively taken a look at the ultimate cost to our city should something go wrong, and the likelihood, and balance that, I'm with you guys. I just want to know that someone has thought this through. To say that, that we could free up, I couldn't concur more with the things that Mr. Gray has said. It's not an either or. And I think there would be widespread support for both, but there has to be an element of being heard, being able to voice our choice, and to be able to know that there is a commitment. There's nothing that prevents us from having a committed schedule and a project list on stormwater utilities going forward. I walked into this meeting emailing Pat Goebel a list of questions, and thank you so much for the presentation, because you have effectively addressed most of those questions. But I just really struggle with the idea that if we move forward with the transportation utility without the chance to at least initially begin the conversation in the public square in a much larger format on a stormwater utility, that we will have missed out on this opportunity. In fact, I would say, given the timeline of what hasn't occurred, I think that we are more urgently needing the discussion, whether it passes or not, to voice the stormwater utility in front of the public for at least an initial discussion. I think you might be surprised with how much interest there is in both topics. But when you say we just are going to create a transportation utility, and people don't see the road plan, in fact, what they see is exactly what was listed in the detailed description of subject matter that was released, is that there is this goal of $500,000 every year that has not been met but for 1 year in 2016. The perception is simply that there's a constraint in the ability to execute these projects. So the subsequent perception would be, should you go down immediately that road to just collect more money? Well, how are you guys going to end up using it anyway? You don't have the bandwidth. We're only human. That there be a deliberate message as to how, whichever route you go, because I will say I obviously respect all of you. Very grateful to be here. That there is a deliberate plan as to how we're going to protect stormwater utility improvements going forward, or remediation going forward, with or without additional funds. It has to be already slated so that we can see what the holdup is. So, you know, I think should this go in a completely different direction, you know, a year from now, what will the future team here seek? And I'll say it does when they come in. What can we be doing most effectively and efficiently and get results in the immediate term? But that's not our issue here in Columbus.
Thank you,
We
Max.
need a long-term vision as to what will impact our city and our cost structure the most over the long haul. And we need a deliberate plan beginning this year on stormwater utility.
Thank you, Max.
That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
I'm going to let Administrator Ellison chime in here for just a moment.
Well, I just wanted to offer some clarification. As far as specific plans and how are we going to spend the transportation money, you know, that has already been laid out there. You know, the Rupert Milky has these plans. We have a priority of the roads. If you want to see any road in the city, basically, we can give you an idea of its rating, its condition, and where it might rank. And not only that, Jason can also tell you which roads might not be as bad as others, but are more ripe for replacement because of the infrastructure that's underneath them. So to say that there's no plan for this money, I think is a misstatement. And you know.
Oh, no.
Based
I
on.
wasn't talking about the roads. I was talking about stormwater.
So based on that and rolling out the information to the residents about a specific plan, that's also in the memo about what are fairly aggressive for the transportation utility. The issue with the stormwater utility is we have less than $10,000 a year that we currently allocate to that. We did do a special project that we had to borrow for. I got an estimate of somewhere, I think, between $30,000 and $50,000 to do a true stormwater analysis of identifying the projects and potential costs. We don't even have enough money in the budget right now to do the study to find out exactly what needs to be done. And so that's part of this circle is we know the roads, we know what we need to do, we know about what it's going to cost because many of those are very well known, they're easy to predict. And so if we, with certainty, go after the transportation problems, and we do free up the money in the general fund, we can then undertake those kind of studies that have to occur to identify what the potential projects and costs and impacts and most bang for your buck are. But if we never get to that point, if we never get out of this cycle of spending $85,000 or $95,000 on transportation and spending $10,000 on stormwater except for borrowing for special projects, we're never going to accomplish either of them. And I think what we can accomplish here is both. But we have to have a little faith and a little trust. And we've been talking about stormwater for months. So, you know, I think we've made the commitment to making this an issue. And we've had a lot of discussions about it. So, I mean, we haven't dropped this issue. We've continued to work on it and continue to find solutions that we think are viable. So I think, you know, giving a little faith to say, if we give this leeway, we can accomplish both. I think, you know, I think it's viable.
Okay.
If I could, sorry, just
Go
chime
ahead,
in for
Mayor
1
Tom.
second. The other thing I wanted to add too is that, I think the council's taking stormwater seriously. And the agenda item right before this is the council decided this year to invest $423,000 from CDBG close money into stormwater projects this year. That's a huge step in the right direction. There were other projects we talked about prior to that of doing street projects with it, other things.
Much
So
sexier.
But yeah, and I said that years ago. Stormwater's not sexy. That's the problem, is that it's always competing for every other dollar during budget time or borrowing time. So I think that the city is taking it seriously, knowing that we are committing that CDBG close money to stormwater projects. That's, again, why I think if you have that this year and we're going through that project, waiting to make sure that we are educating the public on the possible creation of a stormwater utility gives you the educational time to communicate back and forth with the community and take advantage of the transportation utility, I think offers much more flexibility financially to create and free up dollars to continue to do those stormwater projects. When we went through the 2050, Roadmap 2050 project, it's as simple as creating a stormwater fund and saying, this is how much we're gonna have to borrow every other year or every 3 years to combine stormwater projects and to get them completed if you cannot create the utility.
Okay, Ron Curtis would like to chime in here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ron Curtis is my name. I'm here to speak on topic number 11, and there's been a lot of really great discussion so far. Like Mayor Thome, I was not aware of this prior to this agenda coming out and the information that was provided in it, and I think that information was very helpful. I am really encouraged to hear the amount of effort that's gone into discussing stormwater, and then this is what I see as another means of being able to address that issue. With the survey done and the number of people that are interested in roads, to me, that makes a lot of sense because people use the roads, more people use the roads than what are affected by the flooding issues in town. And so you're going to have more people that are interested in correcting the roads than you are that are interested in necessarily dealing with stormwater issues. And then similar to what Max said, those of us that are impacted by the flooding or the stormwater, the impact on us is much greater than individuals that are driving on roads that are not quite up to what they should be. The biggest concern that I have is what Katie was expressing, and that is that between now and an April referendum, you simply are not going to have enough time to properly educate people on what you're trying to accomplish with a stormwater utility. When Kyle first sent out the information about it, one of the people in our group that are interested in having our particular problem solved, immediate reaction was no, it's not right. And I think you're going to run into a lot of that as you're trying to put a referendum out there, that people aren't going to understand that it's not just them, that it's the community as a whole that's affected, and they're going to not be looking at it from that perspective. So I think that without being able to have the amount of time to properly educate people to get the support for it, that it's just going to fail. And then we're going to be in a situation where maybe you'll come back around again, and without there being something to change the perception, I don't think the second time around will necessarily change people's minds on that. I do think that, as Kyle said, that right now there's an opportunity to do the transportation utility where there's not a lot of restrictions. It's not a dollar trade-off on a levy limit or something like that there, and I don't know all the ins and outs. But if that's not there now, and there is the possibility of being grandfathered later on, you know, if it were to be enacted now, that I see as being an advantage. The transportation utility, the big sale to me is that by taking the transportation funding out of, I think, the general budget, I'm not sure that that's the case, but by taking the transportation funding out, that money that's generated by the transportation utility pays for that transportation aspect. So the money that wasn't taken out of the general budget then is free for other community projects. And there's a lot of things in the community that are good projects that can move forward. And it sounds to me like stormwater is one of them. You're talking about the grant that you've applied for. I don't know what particular projects have been identified in that. I wasn't aware of that until tonight. And that's my fault, isn't anybody else's fault. But to me, it sounds like stormwater is in fact a major issue. And the biggest concern I've got is that, you know, back in '08, we had a severe flooding event. A study was done, that was put on the shelf. And here we are 11 years later, and the situation hasn't changed a lot. And so my big concern is that we don't have that same situation again where it gets put on a shelf. So if we can find an alternate means to start addressing that, stormwater utility down the road, that's still a possibility. You know, we can do it. We can do a better job of putting information together as why, you know, the community as a whole should be in support of it, and then hopefully pass it if that's what's necessary at that time. But to me, right now, I think the transportation utility is the way to go, and I'd like to see it, of course, go sooner rather than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Alder Reed.
Oh, I have a question for Kyle. I was wondering what he meant when he mentioned something about the possibility of taking a bond out, and that way we wouldn't have to worry if the rules are changed. Um, I felt like that would bring up the opposite problem, that if we had taken out a bond for a project while expecting the rules to stay the rules to stay the same for the transportation fund. But what if they were then changed to a one-to-one dollar switch, and now we're in kind of a bind? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that would be something you'd have to weigh at that time, that enduring commitment comes with enduring risk. And so if you commit to 5 years of borrowing on something that we enter into now, where we establish the transportation utility, identify some projects aggressively and borrow, say, $1 million or $2 million or something like that, that would lock you into, 10 or 20 years of payments for stormwater improvements. If that transportation money dried up, you'd be stuck with both then, essentially, the transportation needs without funding as well as the debt service. And so that's something you would have to weigh carefully at that time. I think, again, I think the sooner we would make the jump on, I guess, one or the other, but if you go with the transportation utility and lock that in, the more time that passes since it was implemented, I think the safer you become as far as future regulations. They only look back generally so far before it becomes, not really a fair method of, setting new rules.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just still concerned for counting on it in the future. I like the idea of a transportation utility and something to just have a little bit of funds, but I don't feel comfortable with the idea of putting a major project on it.
Mayor Tom.
I just wanted to thank Ron for coming in, and you spurred a thought while you were speaking, and the one thing that I do have concerns about with the referendum this spring right now, without doing, I guess, trying to get the citizenry to actually help sell the idea of a stormwater utility is very important to understand the benefit of, but I've heard misstatements coming from people that have talked to me or asked me questions about it with the assumption that, well, I live near a floodplain, so I'm going to have to pay more for that, and why should I have to pay more? Or I live on a hill and flooding's not an issue, so I don't have to pay anything, right? I think it's just going to take a long time to get through the details and to get everybody to buy into this, because it is the entire community that's going to be helping to fund a stormwater utility. And, I think when we identified this this year, we've had a busy year with COVID and a transition and new city administrator. We found a lot of solutions to a lot of problems that we've had, I think, for a while in Columbus. I just get apprehensive when it's like, here's the solution, and if we don't do that right now, we're never going to fix the problem. And I think when we look at something like the CDBG funding that we're spending, which is close to $500,000, I think we are addressing them, and I think times are changing, but it really does come down to putting pressure on the future city councils to make sure. You guys had a resolution you passed 3 years ago, and now all of a sudden you're not talking about stormwater anymore. It goes for the roads or investment in any other separate department, et cetera, in the city. So I think we're kind of at a place now where we realize we've got a lot of makeup work to do for what hasn't been done in the last 10 years. So, but I am just concerned that people need to understand how the utility would work to get buy-in from them to have the referendum pass. So thank you for your comments again.
I'm just going to chime in again here. Going through the process of the 2050 analysis and getting all the feedback, just going back to that and really remembering we all knew that the roads were going to be a top issue, but I didn't realize how many people were going to actually say, not only should the city spend more money But they're willing to spend more money on the roads as well. Like, they're willing to just pay more, essentially, if we can actually fix these roads. And I think that was a great point that Ron made, that it applies to more people, so it's easier to, you know, I understand that this doesn't have a referendum to it, but still, if they see a charge and it says, you know, transportation utility tax, and it's pretty simple, hey, we're gonna fund road projects with this, or not tax, utility. But I think that that's easier to translate to more people, and I guess that's my only concern. I want, you know, the stormwater needs addressed in this community. I want the roads fixed in this community, and I want a magic wand to make all of that happen immediately. And I think that we all do. But I think the most realistic thing that we can do is collect more money for the most popular, easiest thing to, you know, to hang our hats on and say, hey, you guys said you wanted this. We have it right here in this 2050 plan that we did all this research for, and it's at the top of the list, and we're gonna do this. And then it frees up funds that we can use wherever we see fit. That's my 2 cents. I think it solves a lot of issues, and I guess it's our best shot, I think. Because I do think that there's something to that. If we throw a referendum out there and it fails, the chances of that coming back again are going to be slim to none, because it is going to be hard to change the community's perception after that. So I think what we have to do is we have to decide what we're going to do here this evening. So I think the easiest way for us to do that is for me to just ask each person individually, each council member individually, I guess, which utility you were wanting to support this evening and move forward with first, whether that's stormwater or whether that is transportation utility, or both. I guess the both thing kind of freaks me out, Kyle, because I don't know if that means we should do this, if we do the stormwater utility for April, or maybe that stormwater utility is a November referendum, or I don't know. So
Yeah, and the only reason I mentioned that is I had heard that earlier on. You know, I'm happy with one or the other, or both. You know, we just need kind of the game plan moving forward. So whichever way the options want to roll out.
I guess
for you.
the clarity that I think we need is just to know, I mean, do you think it's feasible that we come up with, that we put a referendum question on the ballot in April? So that would mean 2 months for the stormwater utility, because I think that that's something that we really need to know at the end of this meeting tonight. Are we doing that? I mean, the city staff needs a direction, and we need to start educating people immediately, if that's the case. So.
We'd have to take action in 2 weeks here.
Yes, we would.
Yes.
We'd have to take action in 2 weeks. That's also correct. We'd need the deadline because it would have to be, yeah, okay. So I'm going to start at the top of my Zoom screen. I have Mike McCabe.
My first choice, I guess, would be the transportation utility, and second one, both.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. All right. Ian Gray, you moved up there.
So I still think that the stormwater utility is something that we should at least try and send to referendum. I think that our community would support it more so than what a lot of us are expressing. And I think it's a good time to act on it. It's something that's only going to worsen. I do support the transportation utility, but I think that's something that will be easily put forward to the public at any point in time, because that's something that we know everyone wants and something that everyone will always want. The stormwater utility is something that we need, but isn't something that everyone thinks about. So I really think we need to put our efforts into it to educate the community and push that forward before the transportation utility, because we can always put a transportation utility forward because it will always be wanted by everyone.
Thank you, Ian. Pete Adams?
Just piecing together what, I believe the gentleman's name was, Max, about having a plan, and then referencing what, Administrator Ellison said about we don't even have enough money to get a plan right now in our budget. I say we go with the transportation utility, free up that money, use the freed up money to get a plan for all the stormwater projects, and then proceed from there. So I'm for the transportation utility.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Paul Pfeiffer.
Well, I don't know if my internet will work here, but I sent the chat up. I'm much more for the stormwater, but I want it to be done right. So I don't think there's a hurry for it. I mean, if we're to rush it onto the referendum and it doesn't pass and we don't do it right, I think that's a risk too big to take. We could do the transportation utility at any time. So I would say, I know they're both very important, but I would say hold off on both of them, get our ducks in a row and do it right. And if it's a year from now, so be it. It's still more than we've done in the past.
So let me just to be clear, Paul, you don't want to do either of them at this point? Sorry, no, that's okay. So you don't want to do either the transportation utility or the stormwater utility at this point?
Well, if we were to do, I'll be honest, I'm torn. If we're gonna do one, I would do the storm utility, but I would say my ideal situation would be hold off on it and make sure we do it right, rather than, I feel like rush it in a couple months. But if we're gonna do one, do the storm utility now.
Okay. Okay, Trina?
My preference is still to make an attempt for the stormwater utility on the ballots this spring. I would like to simultaneously collect more information on the transportation utility to keep that ball rolling. I guess I feel that if the program has any stability whatsoever, it should still be okay to try for that in 6 months.
Usually it's the really stable programs that they take away from you. Like the stormwater utility. No, but I guess, I mean, I don't think I need to ask then what the Mayor Tome would like. So I guess council, so we would like to try then, so I'm for the transportation utility at this point. But that puts us at a sort of deadlock, and you wouldn't.
I'm a member of the council.
Yeah, oh, okay. Well, I already had you down here,
Okay.
so, but, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in favor of, I don't think it's fair to say that the transportation utility is something that we're gonna be able to create at any time. I don't. I think that as we've talked about already, this could be a dollar for dollar exchange if we decided to do it. Regardless of how popular it is, it may have a better chance because transportation needs are more popular or more widely known in the community versus stormwater. I don't think that, and I'm not saying that the stormwater utility is not important, I just don't think that it's very likely to get it approved this spring. I would be more in favor of maybe looking at a fall election or something where you have a little bit more time between now and then to work on the transportation utility, know that you're getting the funding to do what you need to do, and then educating the public on the stormwater utility and getting that enough space between the two, I guess, to educate the public. But if I had to pick one, it's obviously the transportation utility because I think it's more possible at this moment.
Okay, so,
Can I just say one quick thing?
sure. Go ahead.
So I just want to remind the council that basically all of us were for putting the stormwater utility up for referendum this spring until the transportation utility became an option. None of us were worried about it getting rushed or anything of that nature until we had another option. We did support this at one point in time.
I agree with that, Ian, but we did support this at one point in time, I think, when we thought we had ample time. And I don't disagree with that, and I think that most of us also want to support just stormwater funding. However, I think that this last few months has been sort of, for lack of a better term, insane around City Hall, and I do think that we all had the best of intentions of being able to, put together a plan to get this on the April ballot, and it just did not occur that way. So no, I think it would be unrealistic for us to just begin now when, we should have began the process of educating the public sooner. I think that, unfortunately, I don't think it happened by design that time is running out. I think it just happened unfortunately. Alder Reed.
Oh, I would definitely want, to have the stormwater on the ballot in the spring. I think, people will be more likely to vote for it, during the time of melting. Uh, even with all the education, I think, chances go down in the fall when people are feeling a little less concerned.
Okay, well, I don't know. We are just, completely split right now. So, I suppose, Kyle, you gave you gave the option of both. What would it look like for both? Like, if we want to do this in 2 months and also push through, like, I think that would be conflicting messages if we tried to do both at the same time.
Yeah, that's my concern, and that's why, essentially that was kind of my recommendation, that we not move forward with both at the same time, because I think it muddies the waters and potentially gives the wrong message about what we're trying to accomplish. Given limited information and misrepresented information, it could look like this is some huge money grab just to fund pet projects, and we're gonna, do all sorts of frivolous things, when the reality is we're trying to find tools that work around long-established levy restrictions that the state has put upon us. And, these are some potential ways that we can, solve it. So we can go forward with both, but I think it detracts from either one of the solutions, and you're trying to solve different things with each one. One of them kind of tipped the scale for me in that I thought I could accomplish two things with one action. And in that way, sort of my big fear here is that we agree to disagree and don't decide to move in any direction, or move in one in an ill-fated way, and then we end up back here next year wondering why we didn't do anything, because nothing happens without money.
I think that's our biggest problem is that.
Yeah. One
we
of
don't
the
have enough
issues
money.
is with stormwater, with roads, we have the data. We've been doing roads for decades. And with stormwater, we don't have the foundation that we really even need. So we're trying to piece it together, but I can't tell you what the first 5 projects are going to be, because we don't really have a list of what those projects are, what they're going to accomplish, and what they're going to cost. Because you need that pot of money to even start that conversation. And, we could start that in the next few months if we established a transportation utility, because you would automatically, right away, start collecting money some point this year. And as long as you collected the same amount as you were planning on spending on transportation anyways, it would be a wash, and you could still make the improvements on the roads, but then immediately start the planning to actually develop, probably with professional engineering assistance, a realistic plan of what we want to do and where we want to do it and what it's going to accomplish. Right now, we're selling it with what we have, which is a study that was done in 2008 or subsequent to 2008, which was a great study, but it wasn't intended to be, an actual detailed a recommendation of what your projects would be and what they would cost. So, that's, I think, where we're struggling is we're developing this on our own without a lot of background because there's not enough resources right now to have the background available.
Alder Adams.
Okay, so after listening to what Kyle just said, would members of the council be okay with approving the transportation utility now using the funds generated from the transportation utility to research what stormwater utility projects are necessary, and then go from there either in the fall? Because it sounds like we could have that money pretty quick and maybe have a list generated of what projects would take what the priorities in the fall. Would that be something that would be worthwhile?
Sorry, I still think you're confused on how we can spend that transportation money. It can't be spent on that. It would only free up funds that we could potentially spend.
Correct. It would free up those funds. The transportation utility would free up the funds from the general fund that we can use then to research the stormwater utility projects.
Or they could be used for anything else that the council decides at that point in time as well.
Yes, Ian, but I think also what needs to also be said is that the council supports funding stormwater. Yourself, you are going to be on council for another year and a half. I think there's plenty of time to advocate for what you want for stormwater funding. Paul Pfeifferon.
Seems that we seem to be spinning our wheels here. Is there any chance of tabling this and bring it back to the town next week, or in 2 weeks, and so we have more time to discuss this? It doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere right now.
I think the only issue is, and why I guess we're still spinning our wheels, is that we have to, if we are going to do a stormwater utility for April's ballot, stormwater utility question, we need to submit paperwork in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so the language has to be submitted. I'm not actually as worried about the creation of the language, but when you create that and submit it, we're locked in. We're going to referendum. There's no deciding in February or March that we're not. Once you do that, you're locked in. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be unusual to have a referendum that you decided later on. Don't worry how you vote. We're not going to do whatever the decision was. So, I mean, that's really the short-term impetus is we have to make a decision if we want to be on the April ballot. If we want to take our time, we can keep the stormwater utility on the agenda and, move forward at a different time when you would pick a future election date to hit.
So we have 2 weeks. If that's the direction that council wants to go, we would have to decide that at the next meeting, and then it would be immediate if that was the case. What's the date that we have to, just out of curiosity, I can't.
I think there's the potential, I think, where you could squeeze in a special meeting. You have to be 70 days before the election date, and I don't know if anyone has that date. The last regular opportunity to approve that language would be in 2 weeks. I think there would be a few more days for a special meeting. Mm-hmm. again, the language probably isn't the issue as much as it is the commitment to moving forward with it and the assumption that you're gonna have real actionable information, you know, to educate the public about what you're gonna accomplish with this. So that's kind of the time crunch.
Okay, what's the will of the council? What is council, do we just want to table this as Paul suggested?
I think we need to do something now. If it would make sense to everyone else and it's something actionable that we could do, if we move forward with the transportation utility, like it seems a lot of people want, could we simultaneously put in, we'll know how much the transportation utility generates. Can we allocate that exact amount of money out of the general fund to discovering and moving forward with wastewater, stormwater? So if it generates 300 grand, can we do something actionable to commit 300 grand to stormwater?
Go ahead.
No, given the setup that we have right now, that's not how it would work. What you would free up is on the calculation sheet, the 2021 budget has about $95,000 in it for contracted road maintenance, which is, again, the mill and overlay and slurry seal. If you did the transportation utility, you would know how much you're gonna collect based on the month you started collecting it. And as long as you collected that amount of money from the utility, which would take about 3 months or so, give or take. So if we started that by summer or fall, you would have enough to do the projects that we normally do. So transportation wouldn't be delayed. At the same time, you would be able to, even by a resolution, rededicate that $95,000 in the general fund to stormwater study or whatever you wanted to do with this council right here. I mean, we could make that decision in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or, you know, anytime in the very near term and commit that $95,000. The $300,000, the benefit of it is it's new money going to transportation. So it's not just taking the $300,000 from the general fund and moving it. It's actually, you know, freeing up maybe that 95, but collecting, you know, basically an additional 2 times more for a total of triple what we're currently allocating.
Right, so long story short, 95,000 is the maximum amount of money it will free up in our budget.
Correct.
Stormwater, so it can't even free up anywhere near what it's generating, which is what I think a lot of the other council members have been kind of under the assumption that it was freeing up that amount of money, but in reality, it frees up $95,000 to potentially maybe use towards stormwater.
Correct, and it would be up to the decision of the council. You know, I'm very certain Jason Letha could have a task order ready for the next meeting that would commit us to spending those monies that we could immediately sign and obligate us to spend that money. And we could make that contingent upon the transportation utility. We can lock ourselves in, you know, kind of as tightly as we want.
So with that new information,
I have
oh, sorry,
Yeah,
Mayor Tome.
if this might help put some, make people a little bit more comfortable, one thing I've been thinking about, you know, in recent weeks is projects that I feel like I need to complete or finish before April. And one of those is the Roadmap 2050 planning process. I've pretty much been, you know, one of the few people that were here at the beginning of the process and the one that's left at the end, but we need to approve the Roadmap 2050 plan through resolution. I have talked to a few people about, you know, how to finish this up, and I think the one problem that I have with the executive summary is that we went through a change in city administrator. You know, I've kind of been the only person that has been involved in the process from start to finish. So I feel that it's very important to have language that's very relevant to the planning process and the outcomes that's relevant to the plan, I guess. But what we could do to put people at ease is to look at the roadmap and then actually change some of the numbers in the budget. If we're planning on borrowing $500,000 every other year for street reconstruction, that was the plan that we put together 6 months ago or a year ago. If there's a transportation utility, those numbers can change. They can be allocated to stormwater projects, and I think that can be reflected in the roadmap project before it's adopted this spring, if that helps kind of put people at ease. It shows a long-term commitment and recommendation to future city council members as well.
One quick question, Mayor. How long has it been that the city was saying that we would spend the 500,000 on roads?
That's been a recommendation since before I've been here. I believe it's around 2010, 2011 is when it was a recommendation made then. I think that there were some assumptions that were put into the numbers on the roadmap that exceeded that $500,000, knowing that you get less road every year with the increased costs. But that's built into the 30-year plan is borrowing essentially every other year.
Right, and no offense, but if we say we're going to spend X amount of money every year or every other year on stormwater, how will it be any different than the money that we've said we would spend on roads that we haven't?
I think the only obstacle to spending the money on the roads is that, you know, you have a borrowing capacity. You can't just borrow $500,000 every single year and not have that ding your debt levy. And I think we've been trying to, you know, deal with reality. You know, how much are we levying every year for street reconstruction or maintenance? And I think this allows us to free up those funds by not borrowing so much.
Administrator Ellison.
I also think when you look at say the Hibbert Street project and just the money for the general fund expenses, so we're not talking utility work, but we're talking stormwater and streets, that's $1.4 million. Then you look at $95,000 in the budget this year. So we're at $1.5 million on road expenditures. That's 3 years worth of that $500,000. And so, you know, I think when we look at that number of how much you hit per year, it's probably not realistic to say you're going to spend it every single year, but on average, you will, because the projects, we don't do Hibbert in 4-block increments. You
Right.
do the whole project all at once, take a large lump sum. So, you know, there has been significant infrastructure spending, you know, probably more in the last 10 years than maybe the 10 years before that. But even at that rate, we're still coming up, I think, you know, less than what we intended. So we have been meeting the 500 probably, but it's hard to tell year over year when you're doing large projects that exceed it by 2 or 3 times that annual amount.
Well, I mean, I guess my only thing I have left to do is if anybody wants to either change their position now, or if we want to table this issue and bring it back to the next cow. I'm going to go around and ask what your preference is one more time. Just let me know if you want to do the stormwater utility or the transportation utility, or if you'd like to table. Mike McCabe.
I'm still, you know, I'm obviously in favor of both, but I'm leaning towards the transportation utility.
Okay, thank you. Ian?
I really feel like the transportation utility, even if it had to go to referendum later, just because it doesn't now, would find support almost any time. And stormwater utility is something that we really need, and I believe we need both, but I really don't want to give up going for a stormwater utility. It's something that our community needs.
I don't think that, Ian, I'm sorry, I just want to chime in here. I don't think that, I don't think many people disagree with you here. I think the main thing I disagree with, and most of us that are in disagreement, is the timeline. but, I mean, I just think I think the timeline is too rushed, and I think if it, yeah, but that's my 2 cents. Okay, so you're still stormwater utility in April.
My big problem is if we adopt the transportation utility, we're going to have to wait quite a while before we can adopt or even send a stormwater utility to referendum. Because once we have another utility on their tax bill, on their utility bills, they're not going to support a referendum for stormwater until they see at least some of the fruit of the transportation utility. And that's not going to happen for at least a year plus. It's not like we're going to get this money in and all of a sudden all of our roads are going to be fixed. It's going to take time for the community to see the fruits of the transportation utility. So if we adopt the transportation utility, we won't be able to go for the stormwater utility viably for quite some time in the future. And we will be flooding many times before then.
And we will have more money overall. And that's my
Maybe
2
to
cents.
use for it. We
Well,
have
overall.
we would free up $95,000 in the budget this year that could maybe be used for it. There's nothing saying that it would be. And
Correct,
it's only
but that's,
$95,000.
and the issues on Parkview were estimated you said $85,000 at you were talking about $85,000 earlier, Kyle.
No, I know that when they had come forward before, they had suggested that there was some, smaller scale improvements that could be made that would alleviate some of the problems. I think when you're looking at the grander scheme, it probably does take a longer time span and some good planning to say, okay, let's fix these high point simple things, but then long-term, is that really adequate enough? Is that robust of a response enough? And likely your answer is no, you're still gonna have to do more planning, more investment over a longer period of time for maybe larger improvements. I just thought with $85,000, we accomplished a lot in Second Ward Creek in 1 year.
Gotcha.
If we start doing that in consecutive years, I think you could really accomplish a lot over time.
Thank you. Okay, Peter Adams?
I maintain the transportation.
Okay. Paul Piperon?
Maintain, unfortunately, it's still the table, I'm sorry.
Okay. Trina?
I still prefer to try to get a referendum through this spring. If we don't get it through the spring and then put up a transportation utility, I don't think people will be ready by next spring for the idea of, just something else, just another utility. I think it's just such a small window for trying to ask the public.
Okay. And Mayor Tome?
I still think transportation is the most possible.
Okay. I've got 3 transportations, 2 stormwaters, and 1 table. Not including myself. I am a transportation, but that still leaves us pretty deadlocked. So I think our only option is essentially to table this until I guess 2 weeks from now would be.
Look, if the only option is to table it in 2 weeks, then the stormwater becomes completely irrelevant anyway. So if there is zero support, or not enough support for the stormwater, then I would like to propose we go forward with the transportation with the caveat that $95,000 is locked into stormwater.
So you'd like to move forward with the transportation, and then propose, like Kyle suggested, we actually develop a resolution that we are going to use the funds that are coming from that transportation, or reallocate the general funds that the transportation utility is providing for transportation purposes, reallocate general funds to stormwater. I think I would be in support of that, and I think that's the easiest way to kind of,
Yeah,
I would be okay with that.
I would prefer something to happen than nothing, and that at least gets something done, so.
thank you, Ian. Am I seeing any other nodding? Trina, you said you're okay with that?
I'll change my opinion and I'll agree with, Alder Gray.
All right. I think we're getting a transportation utility. Wow, that's exciting. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for, I mean, that was a really long discussion, but I think ultimately, I think we're all wanting the same things. It's just what tools we're going to use to get there. And I wish I could have it all too, but Mayor Tome.
I thank you for getting a firm consensus, because there's just no way to move this as it was two weeks forward. And picking a direction at the regular meeting would be impossible, so I think it's
I
good to
concur.
get to some consensus. I think that we had the Rupert Milky engineers, we put them to sleep for about an hour, and
Sorry,
we
guys.
just woke them
Sorry.
up.
All right. All right, now we can move on then to number 12, which is convene to close session per state statute 19.85 sub 1 sub E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investment of public funds, or conducting other public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, specifically to discuss potential acquisition of parcels in the city of Columbus. We will not be taking.
We'll move to
Oh.
convene to closed session for the reasons read.
Adam, seconds.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to convene to closed session. Pat, could you please take the roll?
Gray,
Aye.
McCabe,
Aye.
Pifferone,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Tome,
Aye.
Adams.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. We will not be returning to the air this evening, so thank you for joining us. No further action will be taken.